Hello, all you wonderful people in YouTube land. We are the Nonprofits. The Nonprofits is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and promoting positive atheism. Today, we actually literally have a coast-to-coast panel of hosts. We are from all four corners of the United States and Canada. Hello, welcome there, Neil. I'm the Northeast representative in Ohio, and moving on to my side here, Jena, where are you from?
West Coast, California.
Nice.
The best side.
Then Neil, your area code kind of gives you away.
Atheist.
Canadian. I kind of want that. Maple Leaf atheism. I like it. And Martin.
And I am resident Florida man.
Are we doing a Florida man segment? Because that would be hilarious right now.
Oh, maybe we can squeeze it in
for a future show.
This is the silver lining of the COVID pandemic situation that we're all in, because the of a lot of things shutting down, the Free Thought Library is not open. But because of that, we're able to bring in so many people from everywhere to come and do shows for the ACA. So it's wonderful that we're able to open the doors and bring in so many more people. But that's just the silver lining part. How is the shutdown and the pandemic affecting you guys?
Don't all speak at once.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cut anybody off if somebody's eager. Somebody else start.
I'll go first because I'm Canadian.
So. Yeah.
Actually, I'm an essential worker, I guess you could say, because I work in the what do you call it, like oil industry, but we recycle it, so we're the good side of it. So I also renew antifreeze, like recycle antifreeze as well. That's basically my department. I head up that department. I also work in the lab. And
Jena, you're up. How's pandemic treating you?
It's pretty good. Well, no, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm more busy than ever. I'm working in the healthcare field. I'm a nurse. So for my own building, I temperature screen all patients that come in like the first hour of my day. But predominantly, most of my time is, doing random phone calls for your referral messages, appointments, things like that. But there was a point in time for about a month or two during the summer at, I guess, one of the peaks of, the COVID surge where I did COVID drive-through testing. So I honestly can count that my most that I've swabbed nose and throat was like 200 plus myself. In a day. So it's very active, sweaty work. So it's good.
I am one of the fortunate few that have not been required to take a COVID test yet. And I have to wonder who has it worse, right? Like the person receiving the test or the person who has to give it.
It would depend, because you either, you feel bad to, shove, this long stick down someone's nose, and especially if you have to do a little keto too. So I've done a few of those. But at the same time, you kind of feel down on yourself when someone wants to curse you out while you're doing it. So, it goes both ways.
If somebody is doing that like with an apparatus up my nose, I think that the last thing I want to do is antagonize them. But that's just me. I'm weird.
Yeah.
Martin, what do you got?
Yeah, so I've had a very interesting pandemic experience, some shortcomings and some opportunities. I was managing a restaurant up until this past March when I got furloughed, obviously involuntarily, along with everybody at my pay level in the company. So that's, hundreds of people across multiple countries, not just little old me. And so I took that as an opportunity to leave Albuquerque, where I was living before, and I moved out to Florida. I have some friends out here who helped me get established, helped take care of my cat when I couldn't have him with me for a couple of months. And now I'm kind of just getting back into the workforce. I took advantage of the unemployment that came with furlough, and technically I'm still furloughed with the company, but I'm not just going to wait for them to present me with a job. I found employment elsewhere a couple of weeks ago. But altogether, I want to just reassure everybody, my pandemic experience was completely mild compared to what some folks are going through. I have family that could bail me out if I absolutely needed it. Not asking for any sympathy here. It's just been a rocky road for everybody. And everybody has had their own challenges. Just want to give a quick shout out to Jena and all of the healthcare workers who have been working through this time, that you are all absolutely incredible. As somebody who's, I just took a COVID test this morning, actually, because I'm going in for a medical procedure next week. And the nurses who I dealt with were the sweetest people in the world. And it was just, it was very reassuring to see everybody take it so seriously. Whereas, you know, the rest of Florida is living in their own version of reality right now.
Well, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk a lot about some post-election fallout, and you're going to want to stick around for this. I kid you not. We're going to talk about dropping babies off roofs.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, but first we have an article, a blog post from Skeptic. Link is to this, as always, is in the description, where she's talking about bridging the divide, and it includes cleaning out our own house. Now, this is a rather long blog post, and it goes a number of places, so it's hard to come up with a good summary of this. But this is an article talking about, among other things, a divide, a political, ideological divide, and possibly what the best things to do about them are. So, Martin, take this first. What was your big takeaway from this article?
Yeah, so the first thing that I thought when I saw that was, bridging the divide. What's the best way that I know to do that? And one of the things that I've done during the pandemic is I've been reading Peter Boghossian's books. When I say reading, I mean listening to the audiobooks, because I really suck at reading, I won't say dry information, because he does write it in an interesting way, but that's the kind of information I receive best through audio. And so, yeah, just relating street epistemology back to the concept of bridging the divide in the first place. And it's something that I've been able to do a little bit in my own life recently. I have some right-wing friends that I went to high school with, and I've been trying to relate back to them, essentially by looking for my only goal being finding what their understanding is. My goal is never to change their mind. It's never to make them understand my point of view. It's only to understand where they're coming from so that I can meet them there, and then we can have a conversation together. One of the concepts stressed in Boghossian's How to Have Impossible Conversations is about viewing the other person as your conversation partner, not your opponent. Obviously, if you're having a formal debate, that's going to be a different scenario. But in everyday discussions, we should really try not to have this opponent, enemy complex, and more see it as an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you.
Now, how do you usually find your conversation partners? Like right now, I have a completely solo job. I don't really work with anybody. My only real interaction with people is through social media, and most of the people who are immediately around me have similar ideologies. So, where do you find these conversations with people who have different beliefs than you?
Yeah, there's actually a huge opportunity in social media in just as far as networking goes. I'm not saying go join the vitriolic hate spewing groups, but if you find a group of people who are, in a different political ideology of you, join them, whether that be on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, anything like that. As long as you're willing to come to the table honestly, as long as they are as well, you'll usually find a couple good conversation partners there. And that's where you can kind of plant those seeds. And I'm not talking about seeds of doubt. I'm talking about just seeds of somebody else's point of view, maybe highlighting something that the other person has missed.
Neil, what was your big takeaway?
The whole, I think, right after where it says bridging the divide, it says it includes cleaning our own house. And I think I've been on a show with Jen Aldrich and Aliyah Kai, who's a polytheist, and we were talking about bridging the gap between believers and atheists. Like in Aliyah Kai's case, she's a Hellenist, I think, or something along those lines. But her ideologies don't really cause harm to people. So we felt that we had the same sort of attitude towards humanism in a way. So I think just get together with people that may believe different things than you, because you can always set that stuff aside to better things for everyone. And the whole thing about where she mentions seeing the person with the Trump flag and the Biden flag, and they're shaking hands. I think that's a pretty powerful statement. Just one line right there, because as you know, there's a lot of for lack of a better term that I can't come up with, we'll call them nut jobs that run around with the MAGA hats that are, talking about hating liberals and all that sort of thing, and they're going to put us all to death and all that, like that kind of shit we could do without, you know what I mean? So I think we need to have better conversations on these sorts of things so that people can understand each other a little bit better, because I think there's a lot of misinformation flying around out there.
Yeah, please.
Sorry to interrupt. If I can just jump in real quick there to highlight something that Neil said that I liked. It is the difference between somebody, wearing a MAGA hat with a MAGA flag on their truck and somebody who voted for Trump and is quiet about it. Like there are two distinct categories. And I think it's important that we don't brand everybody as the nut job, so to speak. However, there are way too many of them. They're very loud, they're very rambunctious, and they cause a lot of problems. I've seen them all over the place in Florida.
Their loudness makes them seem like there's a lot of them, but I don't think they're that big of a percentage.
Certainly. Yeah, I agree with that.
Bigger than we'd like, though. Bigger. While it is bigger than we'd like, I just want to again say that there is also the silent Trump supporter. I know quite a few of them who would never buy a MAGA hat or a MAGA flag or anything like that and just vote along party lines. Yeah. And the approach to reach the two broad categories we just painted is always going to be different because they, believe for different reasons.
Sure.
Right. I certainly agree
sorry
with
to interrupt.
No, I certainly agree with that. It's definitely those. Like you, Martin. I certainly know a personal few that silently, under the table voted for Trump and may even did it the second time around. And of course, more often than none, it's because of those single voter issues, where their alignment being, being against abortion, being against or for small business, tax breaks, whatever such and such promises, this current administration has made for them. Those appeals to them, despite throwing out the harsh rhetoric and the vitriol and all that stuff, all the noise, they're willing to block that out and, silently cast their vote for what they feel is beneficial for them and their family.
So in these cases where, we are talking about having better conversations and being more open as interlocutors, but how do you even begin to do that with someone that is either too blatant in their position or not being honest as interlocutors? Is there any hope for that? What do we do?
I think what's worked for me in the past is find some common ground first and then work from there. If you find something that you both sort of have an agreement on, the conversation tends to get a little bit easier, and they kind of let their guard down a little bit. And you might too. So.
Mm-hmm. I think throwing out, arguments you think that hold more weight over what they're trying to press upon you is a wrong way to go too. Because if you're just throwing facts, or if you're just throwing your own type of, arguments towards them, it's just going to go one ear and out the other. Like Neil, I agree with you. You have to meet where they are. And I think meeting them on an emotional level, meeting them to where, okay, you recognize where their stance is, really dig deep and recognize, okay, what is your true reasoning for going this route? Why do you feel this is the best way to take care of that? And if so, why can that not be reflected on the other side as well? And kind of have that discussion. It may take a while, and sometimes it may not come across as great or as beneficial or as successful in the end, but at least establishing that conversation to where you can keep coming back to that discussion and not have it just die where it stands.
See, I have a big blind spot. My blind spot is coming up to the months prior to the election. I had just kind of assumed that there are definitely people who are already decided they're going to vote one way, and there are already people who've definitely decided they're voting another way. And I completely ignored that there's a substantial middle in there. There were genuinely people who, coming up to the last few months or even weeks, genuinely had not made up their mind. So I was looking at the Facebook posts from both groups. I was saying, do you really think that anything is moving? And actually, there were still some minds that were being changed in the middle there. And that's a huge blind spot for me. like you said, it's the silent supporters who don't scream out one way or the other. It's the people who might lean one way or the other and just need a little bit of more conversation, and maybe they haven't properly been exposed to something that would persuade them. But that was just a huge blind spot for me, and I'm very glad that someone pointed that out. How can we find more people like that who are more in the middle and more willing to talk, rather than the people who are very far on the ideologies on either side, but the ones who are willing to say, let's open up and have a conversation and see what everybody's bringing to the table?
Honestly, if it wasn't for COVID, I would have a table and a camera, Anthony Magnabosco style. And seriously, and not to talk to people about Trump. I don't care about Trump. I mean, I care in the fact that, he was the president and still is right now. But convincing somebody that he's a good or a bad person is not going to change their politics. So what I try to get through to them on is actual issues. Talking about policies, $15 minimum wage is a huge one. And just in general, finding, like you said, finding that common ground, finding stuff that we can relate on. I mean, I know 100 Republicans who are mad about their healthcare costs. They all live in the town that I grew up in New York, So like, there are people who are upset about these issues, and highlighting the fact that their politicians aren't doing anything to solve the issues may be true, but instead just try to get them to think about the issue a little bit harder, and maybe look for a different solution and just let them run with that, instead of harping on the Trump bad. I mean, we can all agree here on our opinions, on the man. But in regard to the actual issues, that's where we can find common ground.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it becomes, for me, scary when you do hear the most voiceful and the loud, far-leaning side. It becomes scary. Absolutely. How big their influence can be to those right in the middle. So it's far too often that I even seen it as one example that I know of a particular person, to where they were a middle, like a centrist voter, I guess. A centrist voter. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much they leaned more towards right, they leaned towards left. They voted on what that issue was, and that's just how they ran. But given in the last few years, and given just jumping off from the previous administration to the current one, just the almost physical, not just psychological change that I've seen from this particular individual, is quite scary. Because now it's not, before it was open to conversation, open to that discussion and willingness to change. Now it's just hard wall. No, it has to be this. They're trying to remove this. They're trying to take away my liberties from this. COVID is trying to inhibit me from doing such things, blah, 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 blah. It's just compiling to where it's like there's so much wall between yourself and that person to try and reach and have that conversation, discussion that you really want to have. But unfortunately, it's a struggle to try and bring them at least closer to your side, or at least back to the middle like they were. And that's scary.
Yeah. So hard enough to do that with people who are, direct polar opposites from what you believe. But one thing they're talking about this article is cleaning out your own house. What about the people who are in our community, but somehow are holding on to one specific or another ideology that is harmful? Is there any redemption for that? Or are they just, that negative thought is just too much and they don't belong, quote unquote, with us, if there even is an us?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, I was just going to say, realistically, as we've spoken about before, the only thing that the atheist community has in common is that we're atheists, right? So there's all kinds of different atheists out there. I mean, I know a friend of mine who, great guy, but still believes in astrology for some reason. So is that harmful? Maybe not so much for him, because he kind of looks at it like fortune cookies, sort of, a little advice to go by. But it could be to some other people that take it seriously, right? So
or that are milking
absolutely.
money off of other people. Like the only problem I really have with
Oh, yeah,
astrology is that it's like $1 billion industry. Like someone's continuing to buy into this, and one more voice
going,
that says, "I believe in astrology."
Sorry, here's the thing. If somebody was spending thousands of dollars a month on fortune cookies, you would have a conversation with them, right? Like a friend of yours.
I don't know.
And so, okay, fair. Let's say they were throwing out the cookie and they were just in it for the fortune. Thinking that would improve their luck somehow. That would be a point where an intervention would be important. But if they're just paying $1 for them every week, it's like whatever. Let them enjoy their thing, but we all know that they're full of it.
Well, they come free when you order Chinese food. But have you ever played the little numbers on the back of some of these ones for your lottery?
I don't play the lottery on principle. So,
well, I play Keno at the pub or something once in a while, right? I only play two numbers, and I often win. I'll drop $20 a draw, and I'll win like $100 every time. Yeah,
there you go.
It pays for the draw.
It works.
It works. Not every time, obviously.
Right.
Fair.
But if you can sit down and produce a result, good for you.
Well, I watch them for a while, and I see the popular numbers come up, and I'll pick two, and I'll run them for 4 draws, and then I'll hit 50 or $100 every time. So, well, I'm not every time, pretty close. Twice a week, easy.
Nice.
I wish I had that luck.
Nice.
No, I recently
real.
From growing up in Alaska, the lottery and stuff like that was just never part of our. We didn't have one. So then I moved to Ohio, where you go to the gas station and they have like 20 different pull tabs, right? And since it was never part of my reality, I never started to buy into it, and I'm okay with that because most people probably end up losing, and I'm okay with going nowhere over there.
Yeah. If most people won, there wouldn't be a lottery.
Yeah.
I will say one thing.
Yeah.
Gambling for me these days is ordering things off the Wish app.
Oh God.
I am yet to do that, so I will exercise proper caution.
Too true.
I did get some really nice Bluetooth earbuds though, which are pretty cool.
There you go.
Sweet.
If I can just say one more thing on the street epistemology subject before we move on here, I hear you kind of queuing it, the next article.
Why do you want to do that?
No, one of the things that's very important for cleaning up our own house, and something that I can always do better at, is modeling the behavior that we want to see. It's not just for your interlocutor, it's when we're here. It's recognizing that your opponent, even if you suspect they may be disingenuous, realize that until you can kind of prove that, you should take them seriously. There you go. I said opponent again. I meant interlocutor.
No, that's a great point, Martin. I was gonna demonstrate the same thing because I'm a moderator on the Atheist Community of Discord, which is like the fan base for ACA. So being there for over a year now, I've had various different discussions of people that I share similar views with, people that are just way out there, but we're all atheists for the most part. Predominantly that server has atheists. And so it's very, I always strive to promote civility. I mean, part of our rules for the server is to be respectful to one another. And no matter if you're a believer or non-believer, it's atheist friendly or atheist community, right? So whether you believe or you don't believe, having that conversation, at least being respectful for one another, sharing, conversing, at least make it civil. And at least from there, we can have a foundation to where we can have a like-minded discussion. We can at least find some type of common ground, even if we have disagreements on belief.
Yep. Seems like a good a time as any to plug the nonprofits Discord. We'll have links in the description for that. And whenever this show premieres on Sundays, I do my very best to be in the Discord live chat, so I can be there to directly answer for anything that I might be saying on the air. Thank you, by the way, for moderating that wonderful service. I enjoy being on there with everybody.
Rock on, Discord.
But yeah,
Jena.
We had a lot of fun with that first article. So now let's be really, really sad. Let's talk about some fallout from the post-election here. We'll start off with an article From Yahoo News, white supremacist group training for violence in case Donald Trump loses election, says reports. Just quick summary, a white supremacist group is training for violence in case Donald Trump loses the election. The Patriot Front is preparing for civil conflict as they believe that the president's defeat on election day is inevitable. According to the report from BuzzFeed, the Patriot Front was reportedly created in the aftermath of the Charlottesville far-right riots and now has hundreds of members around the U.S.
Now, is that the Judean Patriots Front or the Patriots Front of Judea?
Yes.
Now
Sorry,
it looks
I'm looking at the photos in the article right now, and just since the link is available, if you're listening to this as the podcast, please go look at the article. There's a lot of conflicting ideologies going on here, but the predominant theme is Confederate flag, from what I can see, and that white with a black cross flag that I'm actually not too familiar with.
I don't think I've seen that before either. Anybody know anything about that?
Or white with a black X, I should
Not
say.
familiar with that one either.
Maybe it's their own unique branding.
South Nationalist flag. Quick Google. Fun. Sounds like a charming group.
Okay, so we do have this apparently well-armed group. And the number that they gave here at the time of the article was about 280 members around the country. That's a small number, but it's not insubstantial. And again, these are just the ones that are arming themselves and organizing themselves. And this is only one such organization. It's like, I like your take on this, Neil, and I think it's a good a place as any to start.
Oh, yes. I mean, they can be as militant as they want to, but let's face it. If they want to start, doing, running around and trying to export, as they say in the article, Jews and people of color and yada, yada, they're going to have a real hard time doing that because the U.S. military will just walk in and squish them like little cockroaches. So, I mean, it'd be nothing to them just to go in there and put an end to that. And if they try to, I'll guarantee you they probably would.
Okay, other takes on
this. I was going to say, I don't doubt that for a second, Neil. I think the problem, and we're going to get into that with another article later, a little foreshadowing, but I think the problem is when the wolves get in the hen house, as it were, with the police. And but you're absolutely right that the military versus a militia group would not be a contest. The U.S. military would absolutely squash them. Even a smaller nation's military, such as Canada, would squash them.
Yeah, we'll come down with our hockey sticks and start swinging.
Exactly.
And our mooses.
No,
we'll just stick all the Canada geese on them. That's
even the article says that they make grandiose claims, but their grandiose claims are a white ethno-state. So we still have to take that part seriously, even if they're not seriously capable of exerting the force needed to create it. Yeah, this is an interesting group.
I mean, I don't think they. I wouldn't say the majority are seriously enticed to do some type of extravagant violent act, but quite some have in recent demonstrations and protests and things like that, especially against Black Lives Matter, especially in some cases just that voter intimidation leading up to the election and everything. But I think my biggest takeaway would be the overarching concern of the aftermath of things that will happen with groups such as these come mid-January when we have that new administration. We already see these frightening demonstrations from these groups. Yeah. And it's not like they just have come about in the last few years. They've been around for a long time. They've just been more overt, I have noticed, especially not even since the last presidential election, but even since we elected our first Black president. They've just more and more slowly come out from the fold, and more people that not necessarily within these groups in public do recognize and sympathize with them. And so they feel more freedom to voice their hate, to voice their, violent rhetoric almost without shame. And that's what scares me. I fear that if more of that demonstration, if more of that is seen, and it allows that persuasion of others that are more closeted of, being more overt about it, then it only further pushes, this whole left and right ideal to where this side is wrong, this side is right. And we just can't come to the middle to, really function as a country together. That's my fear.
Absolutely.
So what's the best reaction to this? Obviously, you can't ignore it. If you have a couple hundred people in a city with flags and guns, they're not shooting anyone yet, but one could argue it's only a matter of time. I think the best reaction to this that I've ever seen is an even larger group having a peaceful demonstration right next to them, to show them you don't have the numbers, you don't represent the ideals of our community. And there's more of us saying, put your guns down. They're not going to do any good here. We don't support your ideology. We don't support your methods. And you are such a small portion of us that you couldn't speak for us. Because if I tell you, if I see a group like that marching down the street and it's just me, I'm going to have a real hard time thinking that I can stand up to them, like myself as an individual, right? But what should be done, either regulation wise or just you're a good citizen wise, when something like this happens in your town?
Yeah, just in general, I'm going to plug anti-fascist organizing real quick. It's important, like you said, Puck, to turn out and oppose these people in a nonviolent and peaceful, and like I said, modeling the behavior that we want to see from them. If we model that behavior ourselves in a counter protest, then even if they don't model it in return, the differences will be so stark that it's rather hard to paint a narrative otherwise. So numbers are on our side here. In my opinion, weapons would never, resolve this conflict. If I went to go protest against a militia, I would not bring a weapon myself. That would not help anything, in my opinion.
No.
Yeah, so just turning out in general. Something that I wanted to highlight here is kind of the difference between calling for violence and rhetoric that inspires violence, because those are two different things. An actual call for violence is like, let's go hurt this group of people. Whether that be Black and brown folks, Jewish folks, LGBT folks, any subgroup, that's a call for violence. But rhetoric that inspires violence are like things preceding the Planned Parenthood shooting in Colorado, for example. Nobody ever said go shoot a Planned Parenthood, but they said, hey, they're killing babies here. And somebody took up that call to action, essentially, and went and committed a violent act. And so that's why it's very important to just in general oppose these people wherever they are, whether it be in your community, in an online community. Be vocal, speak out, show up if you feel safe. Don't show up if you don't feel safe. I just want to stress that nobody should ever go to a counter demonstration if they don't feel safe going. But bring friends. Safety in numbers.
I don't remember where I read it, and so bad me for not having a source. But one reason that they don't have specific calls to violence is so they don't have any liability if someone decides to act out on it. They can say, well, we didn't tell them to do that. That someone else acted out of our behalf, and then they can remain as clean of an organization as they are. And still say we're not inciting the violence, but in a way they are. And we talk about my blind spots a lot on this show. And one of my blind spots until very recently was microaggressions. When you start disparaging people or groups in very, very small ways, in jokes or in offhand comments that don't get stopped, and then it starts to escalate, and that's where you end up with far extreme groups like this, because they go to places where that rhetoric is acceptable. And yes. when you were talking, Martin, about the call to violence versus just inspiring violence, I thought back at my days when I first learned about microaggressions. Where do you stop it? Where do you start to say and pull someone aside and call them in and say, this is dangerous if you let this go too far? I can understand why you thought it was funny. It's not, and here's why. Where do you start that? When does it stop
Yeah.
being edgy humor and start being, we got to do something about it?
I'd say as soon as there's an audience.
Yep.
If it's just somebody, if it's just somebody with no viewership, just being a troll on Reddit, yeah, probably let that go. But when we get into people who have tens of millions of views on YouTube, Facebook, choose your platform, who represent far right and alt right ideologies, because there is a slight discrepancy between the two. It's kind of meaningless at this point. They've all jumped on the Trump train, but there used to be a difference. But shoot, where was I going with that? I'll hand it off to somebody else. I've talked a lot about this subject.
Recently, I was with a couple of other people, and somebody told a joke that was not, an off-color joke, sort of a racist type one. And I jumped all over him, and he was like, "Whoa, man, it's just a joke." And I go, "Yeah, maybe it's just a joke right now for you, but somebody that might overhear this might have different feelings about that." So you have to sort of, a joke is one thing, but somebody can take that to the next level after hearing something like that too. And that's a problem when we have these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Or these sorts of jokes.
Actually, I kind of remembered where my train of thought was going a second ago. Back to street epistemology. One of the, ADD brain, it happens sometimes. One of the biggest things to do when you're especially engaged in one-on-one discussion, like I said, when there's no audience, you handle things differently, is try to avoid call-outs in certain situations, but also in other situations, you should use call-outs, like maybe the one that Neil cited. I don't know what the joke was, and I'm sure your discretion was on point, but you also don't want to go around criticizing every single little thing that happens around you, because then people won't listen to you anymore. But yeah, if somebody makes a racist joke, absolutely call them out, because that's a discrepancy that shouldn't be allowed to continue. But yeah, as far as avoiding like smaller call outs, like, just kind of learning to let things go for the sake of the conversation. But if it's a joke, then there's always an audience. So yeah, that would be one of those situations where you definitely want to intervene.
I think there should be no excuse as to when when a certain person or an individual that not too far recognize themselves as part of this certain group, but that overarching group doesn't necessarily say or make that stance to have them promote whatever kind of act or saying that they do. I think they shouldn't be forgiven or written off just because, like, oh, I didn't say it, or oh, we don't promote this. But they recognize for themselves that they are a reputation of your group. You need to do more to denounce it. You need to do more to talk it out of, your rhetoric, because your rhetoric is pretty much saying and convincing these other people that think they are a representation of you to do what you think they want you to do. Prime example is, Trump in his first debate, where he, pretty much said, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. And then next day he wants to say, oh, I don't know who the Proud Boys are. And well, okay, if that's your excuse, first, turn back to your advisors and shame on them for not getting you on the up and up. And honestly, I don't believe that for one bit. Two, you further still push the rhetoric that you just demonstrated the night before. And that only speaks to people like myself, to people of other skin color and other minority groups and other people that are just fervently against the type of vitriol that this administration has, conjured up in the last few years. It just tells us that, no matter, our rights to do our civic duty, to cast our vote, or to, have civil protests against the wrong that's done against us. You make us feel as if we're low, and then you demean us and continue to do that and say, oh, I'm going to have these people stop you because I'm unjustly being written off and I'm the one that actually won and blah, 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 blah. And that should be, there is no forgiveness for that. it's hard for me to find the words because it utterly frustrates me since the moment I've heard that, and it's disgusting.
No,
I'll tell you this: like, I don't strongly identify with my ethnicity. I don't really have a Pacific Islander community here, but I will say that in the past 4 years, especially living where I live, I've become more keenly aware of my difference in immediate appearance. I not to the point where I can immediately point to a situation and say that this happened because of some sort of racial discrimination, but definitely I felt a little sense of, okay, how is the person who's driving next to me waving this flag looking at me thinking? And then I do remember I have gotten go back to your country before, even with someone who did not know my ethnicity and that I was born a United States citizen. I've gotten that, and I tend to brush those aside. But in the past 4 years, it's been a little more eyebrow raising than any other time in the past. So I can hear where you're coming from. I can hear about being sensitive to the political and social climate now, but let's put a realistic take on this. How much further do you think they're going to be allowed to go before there's going to be some serious stamping out? Obviously, if they start doing anything violent, there's going to be a very, very strong pushback on it. But how much more do you think they're going to go before someone says, okay, we're not even going to risk letting you fire off those guns that you like waving around. We're going to put an end to this right now. How much further do you think they have to go?
Well, when they start talking about running into places and blowing people away, I think they'll probably step right in there.
One would think the whole Pizzagate and many other scenarios. Right. No, absolutely. That is what should happen, Neil, 100%.
Right.
As we've seen, especially in more, I guess, rural, less policed portions of America, these... I mean, I almost want to call them terrorist cells at this point, but let's keep calling them militias because that's what the article calls them in some parts of it. It also calls them a white supremacist training group. So, just like you said, it should happen when the calls to violence actually go out. But in reality, it only tends to happen, from what I've seen, when either the FBI, like with the governor, the governor of Michigan, is that right? Who is threatened to be kidnapped recently. Yeah. On occasion, the government will actually step in and research these groups and infiltrate them and shut them down effectively when there is a credible threat. So does the system work? Yes, but are there a lot of nuts or insane people out there with guns? Also, yes.
I got a buddy here in Canada who's he's kind of like a Rambo. He's like an ex-SEAL or some shit like that. So, am I allowed to curse? I didn't even ask that.
Oh,
but anyway,
I fucking hope so.
Anyway, so I could just hit him up and send him down. You can go down there and take them all out for you.
It would be a wonderful conversation to have, to see how people who live in other countries view American gun culture. We don't have the time today, and it wasn't exactly relevant in the scope of the article, but that's something I've always been curious about, because this is not something that I'm guessing happens in Canada a lot. I
wouldn't agree with that.
Really? Okay. But this is
one of my best friends, Conspiracy Dan, as we call him, because he's all full of all these crazy.
Okay, blind spot.
Dude, he's got stashes of guns buried on little islands all around the area.
No.
Just in case.
Does he think he's going to have the time to go dig them up?
Oh, he lives on a boat, so he can go and do whatever.
Right. But if somebody's coming for him, is he really going to have the time to go dig them up? I mean, I know you're not Conspiracy Dan, but that's hilarious to me.
Well, I had travel plans to Seattle this time next year. I'm starting to rethink that.
When you're up that way, Buck, you gotta.
I mean, burying gold is one thing, but a gun, you need it in your hands for it to be useful.
Oh, don't worry, he's got some still.
I'm sure not all of his guns are buried. I'm sure it's probably a 50-50 split. Yeah. It's the back
stashes of ammo and guns. I think there's 2 or 3 different little islands that he went to.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible to me. I'm not surprised. I'm just my
His
expectations have been lowered.
holidays include going over to Europe. I can't remember where, but he goes and they shoot off all these massive guns, and that's his holidays for 2 weeks. He goes there, drinks with these guys, and shoots stuff. Well, he doesn't drink
Go
anymore.
to a place where it's really hard to get guns just to shoot guns.
Yep.
Okay,
Got
normally
it.
I have a really nice smooth segue into the next article, but this is
Kind
just
of ruined that.
this is just so
Damn
strange.
Canadian.
We should just go ahead and call it what it is. This is strange but true.
Strange but true.
The link to this video is in the description, and it is just, I'm going to try to describe it, and there's no way that my description is going to do this justice. But these men were holding looked like maybe a year or so old, held by their hands and feet up over the edge of what looked like a 2-story house, and dropped the child. And then the child was caught by several other men with, it looked like a rug or something. This description is not going to do it justice, so please watch the video yourself and watch it. And apparently this is for some religious benefit. What was your first impression when you saw this?
I instantly recalled the whole hoopla when Michael Jackson had his baby and he held him over the ledge and it dangled.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
And there was like a big media storm. That was my instant thought. Not funny, but yeah, that's what I instantly thought. And then secondly, that's horrific, and to say the least.
Well, what is comedy but tragedy plus time?
Yeah, I really don't want to be laughing about this, but there's no way to describe that without sounding like I'm joking about it.
Yeah.
This is, you guys all saw this, so at least please give me this for the audience. This is a good description of what happened, right? Not exaggerated at all.
You could describe it 10 times and it still wouldn't do the video justice. Because the video is incredible of just watching. And like, it's not like these are newborns, because that's where immediately where my mind went when I heard about it before I watched the video. They're not newborns. They're 1-year-olds. Is it safe? Not at all, in my opinion. Probably not, according to a doctor. I'm not one. I also wouldn't, even do that to my to my pet, let alone my child. Like, a 50-foot drop is not safe, even if there's somebody to catch you below. But I will say that I'm glad that there were so many people holding the rug at the bottom. I was kind of, again, in my mind's eye, I was at first envisioning like 1 or 2 people running around. But no, there's like 20 of them all holding the same sheet. Mm-hmm. Again, is it safe? No. But is the baby likely to be harmed? I mean, probably not, or they wouldn't do it so much.
I mean, this stemming from that little snippet from the video, in the description, it says it's like a 700-year-old ceremony or type of tradition to where they do this type of ritual where they drop the child, and it's supposed to somehow give them the belief of being more intelligent, being more lucky and healthy and stuff. And I just was like, what are the statistics on that? Like, really?
I'd like to know how many times they missed.
And it's nothing like, right. And it's nothing like anything else that we've heard from any other
more than one
following or belief or ritual from any other type of cult or anything like that, right? So it's just interesting that this type of practice was chosen, and these people believe that doing this practice will help this child be what they want it to be. I just don't see the correlation there, and it's astonishing.
And you know how they're justifying this? They're saying, well, look, I was dropped when I was a baby and I turned out okay. So I think that we're okay with continuing to drop babies. They'll be fine. And you're right, Martin, they are just one squirm at the wrong time away from not being dropped squarely on top of that rug. Right. This is like clearly not safe and could be immediately harmful.
Oh, and then at the end of that 1-minute clip too, it panned to one of the children post-drop who was just like in tears. So obviously there's no, from the humanist perspective, there is no consideration given to the child in this situation. Mm-hmm. I was only speaking for the mere physical capacity for trauma. I was not giving, and with what I said earlier, I wasn't trying to like cover for it in any way. Yeah, the actual trauma for the kid is probably awful. can't imagine.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, because my mind goes in weird places, and we often talk about the harms of religion, and how religious beliefs can be harmful. Now, I would go so far as to say that this is an extreme case. There are not a lot of religious groups. This isn't even representative of that region. I would guess that this is a small religious group within that country or within that area. And I think it would be wrong to use this and say, you know what those religious people do? Religion makes you drop babies off roofs. Okay. I think that's taking a hyperbolic step too far. There are other more relatable, more understandable, and more present dangers that religion does, that we don't have to use examples like this to talk about the harms of religion. Clearly it is harmful, but we have better examples that we can use for how religion harms people.
Exactly. Just to chime in real quick, two that come to mind are the anti-vax movement and the fact that, Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, and a couple other small groups don't take blood transfusions. Those two things right there are literally life-ending.
Yeah.
Being a blood donor, that pisses me off to no end.
As somebody who wants to donate blood but cannot due to my sexual orientation, that also pisses me off.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was going to just say they've actually lightened up on that here in Canada, where as long as you haven't had any relations for 3 months, I think, and they'll screen you now, and you're able to donate. Also, you can go to the university here, even if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, you can still donate, and it goes for medical research.
Wow.
So it's still a good thing
to know.
Yeah. No, I was going to reference even in healthcare. Of course, I occasionally deal with members that are Jehovah's Witness, and part of my duties is to assist with scheduling them for surgeries. And so, with this particular surgery, of course, you have to have that emergency blood just in case certain risks or things happen during the surgical procedure. So, more often than none, quite a few would opt out or want to be referred outside of their network to have that bloodless surgery. And not a lot of, obviously we want to accommodate every person and be as inclusive as we possibly can. But that is exceedingly difficult to do when you're putting your life at risk for an elective surgery. Mind you, this is nothing as far as like ED is concerned, right? But you're putting yourself at risk for this elective surgery, and then something happens while you're on the table, and we need to give you blood, but we can't. So it's rough.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's awful. And yeah, just to clarify what I said earlier, I want the best possible care to be available for every man, woman, and child on this planet. Healthcare, should not be something that is a privilege. When it comes to elective surgeries, like you said, obviously could be a little bit of a different topic, but yeah, I want Jehovah's Witnesses to have good healthcare. But when you show up to your doctor and you say, hey, you can't provide this kind of care to me, it doesn't really do your doctor a whole lot of favors as far as sustaining your life.
So we don't have to go very far to find better examples of how religion is harming people here closer to us. And I think that's and I really hate using the word amusing for this, but as amusing as more outrageous tales are, like baby tossing, there's so many more better things that we can be talking about to people with regards to harm. So I appreciate you guys, and Jenna, thank you very much for that personal story too.
Certainly.
Okay, well we're short on time already, and there's still 2 articles to go over. So let's move on. Yeah, we only have half hour left to go over the next 2 articles. So we are. All right. This one's is from Independent. Article down on the bottom again. Police chief resigns after calling for death to Marxist Democrat bastards.
Ooh, that's me.
A police chief in Arkansas resigned after making posts on social media saying death to all Marxist Democrats in a QAnon conspiracy, calling for the refighting of the Revolutionary War to eliminate fraud.
Sorry, just that last sentence always got me. Like when I was reading this article, to eliminate fraud. The first
kid you
revolution
not,
was
it's-
over no taxation without representation. The second one is just generic fraud, apparently.
Yeah, we link to the articles so that we don't get accused of strawmanning or misrepresenting.
Never.
And I suppose I may have read that in a way that indicates a little bit of being incredulous about, really, is this what we're talking about?
Because
That is
it's an
word for word
incredulous
what I'm
claim.
seeing in the
Right.
article.
Right.
Jenna, kick us off here. Jenna, what's your take on this article?
Honestly, Puck, it's a nothing burger. I mean,
Okay.
clearly he was just joking. I mean, he should not have lost his job. That's how I feel. End of story. No, but seriously, really, and like we get enough of people that actually follow and believe this kind of stuff. But if, like he says in the article, he quote unquote said it as a joke, but they also demonstrated in the article that there are other examples of him saying the same type of rhetoric in whatever. Not, it wasn't a tweet. What was the social media? It was Parler.
Parler.
Only
Of course.
within the last week I've ever heard of that, and I'm like, wow. And
It's already a dumpster fire.
I bet it is. And there are other platforms like that too, where it's more right leaning type of, extreme things like that. But nevertheless, I mean, even it's bad enough that with our last presidential cycle in 2016 that we had, these bots that pushed out this type of stuff, right? Where it pushed out, that fake news stuff and, things against Clinton and things about, voting for Trump in a positive way, or, dialing back the whole supremacy talk and everything. It's bad enough that we have people doing that and have people demonstrating that and actively getting themselves involved in, dressing up in militia gear. And as we've been talking about, and even in a previous show have been talking about, people being, demonstrating intimidation, being intimidating to, people that want to vote or what have you. But to have someone just blatantly say like, oh, it was a joke. I can't take that sitting down. It's too much that we have enough of this kind of toxic culture right now with politics and social issues and everything else. It's just too much to bear to want to just take that sitting down to be like, oh, he was joking. It's too much fire to the already fuming rhetoric that we have when we're trying to get not to get back to where we were before, but rebuild and reestablish ourselves and be better.
It's funny though how they say, "Oh, it's a joke" after they're sort of called out about it too.
Of course,
always.
Yeah, and what was it? It said here, the further down the article, it claimed that the posts were not only fake, but it was a fake profile. And then he was later quoted as saying, "I am honored to soon be serving under President-elect Biden." So that was an interesting take on the art. Like he's completely doing a 180. And I don't even know where to go with that. Like
he's struggling for air at that point.
Yeah, but then I put myself in a similar position where if somebody had used, like, I have a rather nondescript name down there, and somebody could use that name, Puck, to make a profile somewhere and start speaking, especially since my image is a generic image that you could just rip off my profile and use anywhere because I don't have my picture up in most of my social media. And if somebody started representing Puck and saying this stuff on Parler, I don't even know where I would begin to defend myself, other than by saying, hey, I have a bunch of people I work with a lot, and I'm pretty sure they can vouch for me. But how, if that were to happen, how do you begin to defend yourself?
No, that's a very good point. There's a lot of misinformation out there these days, and we definitely want to make sure we're not going after people, or really, I mean, we probably shouldn't be going after people, but if we do, make sure it's for the right reasons. For example, somebody like our president right now, obviously the criticisms against him are pretty well founded. But yeah, if we're gonna be talking about sheriffs in other counties that we don't live in, we want to make sure we know what we're talking about. So I'd say the best thing to do would be to just Google the person and see what else you find. see if they've made the news recently, see if there's other accusations against them. As far as you, Puck, if that ever happened to somebody like you or a content creator or whatnot, which I'm sure it has, that really does suck, because that's a huge way to ruin somebody's reputation. And that should never be taken lightly.
So, Neil, you had an interesting take on what we should do about this.
Yeah. If he's serious and he's going to retire, let him go. Fade away into obscurity.
Bye-bye.
And so this reminds me of what they do.
People like that around, right?
Yeah.
Like if you ever watch sporting events and there's some streaker who decides to make a fool of himself by running across the field in the middle of the game, networks make it a point not to show that person on TV at all, right? And because they don't want to say, oh, if you pull this stunt, then you're going to be on national television. Right. No, they cut away and they show something else. So now we have two different ideas here. We have one of them is, okay, this happened. If we just don't say anything about it, they'll realize that this is no way to get attention. And it's just shut off and it's done and dealt with, and we move on. And then there's the other side of it, which I think most of us are going to be on, where you don't ignore this. You call it out and you find other people who are like-minded, find where they're gathering and start to stamp out these negative ideas. I'm kind of torn here because I can see the effectiveness of both, but I'm guessing that you guys lean more toward one or the other. Jena, what do you think we should do? Ignore or fight?
No, you have to fight.
Okay.
It's too the ignoring or sitting back and waiting for something to happen, that takes too long, and you just sit back and wait. It makes me think of, I hate to kind of make it into a religious conversation, but it makes me think like when you lean on, what is the verse? Lean not on your own understanding. Just, just follow the Lord's guidance by faith and things like that. If you're just gonna sit back and say, okay, it'll be dealt with, it's out of sight, out of mind, that whole type spiel, then nothing ever gets done. If it doesn't, I understand that, and I already expressed this concern. The more you see it and the more certain individuals get influenced by it, the more potential that it will be more harmful to others. But at the same time, I heavily lean on fighting back. I heavily lean on voicing, this is wrong. This should not be the norm. We should change this rhetoric. We should call out these individuals, call out this hateful stance and oppression and things that just cause more and more harm to everyone around us, and just put a stop to it. Because if we don't voice that and if we don't speak out on it, then nothing will ever change about it.
That's right.
Now, if you go to the website in question, the social media platform that they were discussing here, if you just go to their splash screen, their intro page, they will pitch the idea that you can manufacture your own feed. You can customize your feed by selecting the type of content you would like, and they make it a point to say that they censor as little as possible. And in theory, this seems like it's a good thing. No censorship. You can say what you want and have a free space to do so. Why is it that these spaces almost always turn into cesspools of calls to violence and really, really harmful rhetoric, instead of being that nice open marketplace of ideas that I think might actually be what they initially might have tried to go for? If not this site, at least others who try to be, we want to be open and have as many conversations as possible. Why do you think it always seems to go in the right direction? And by right, I don't mean correct. I mean they go toward the right.
Well, so
why do you think that is?
I was going to say specifically for Parler, it's because they put out, like you said on their homepage, they put out a call for people who have been deplatformed. Deplatforming, I mean, could be any number of things, but in general, when I think of deplatforming, I think of people like Sargon of Akkad, people like Stefan Molyneux, who get banned from Twitter. And it's like, if you get banned from Twitter, you probably did something really, really bad, because there's a lot of bad people on Twitter who never get banned. So, but yeah, so when I see things like Parler pop up, obviously it's going to go right wing, because they're targeting the audience that is too far right for mainstream social media. So they've made their bed. You know, they're just inviting folks to come over at this point.
Is there a way to have an open, very little moderated or policed forum or social media site like this that does become that ideal marketplace of ideas for honest conversation, without it turning into a place where microaggressions and edgy humor start to take over? Is there a way to have that utopia?
I don't know if that's possible, man, because it doesn't matter. It seems every time.
Yeah.
It just seems every time it degrades into exactly what you just said, Puck.
Yeah. I think that good moderation, and I don't mean moderation as in taking down, right-wing ideas in general. I wouldn't have fun if I only hung out with people who agreed with me. Right. I'm always here for the conversation. But yeah, the things that they're taking down are like, claims that Trump won the election, for example. That's truly false. And that is why a lot of people are leaving Facebook, because they're claiming something that's false in public. And Facebook is saying, hey, we don't want to use our server space to support your false claims, so we're not going to. And you can either leave or play ball. And then Parler says, we will use our server space to use for anything, including your delusional nonsense. So come on down. And so obviously I think that space is going to go by the wayside. Like I said earlier, it's already a dumpster fire from the screenshots that I've seen in certain areas.
Yeah.
But
bring back MySpace.
I saw a meme earlier today. It had a picture of the Unite the Right rally, and it said that Parler is being rebranded as Mindspace. Like MEIN space.
Oh no!
It's just that's not right.
I still remember having a MySpace profile. Those were the days. Those were much simpler times.
Tail end. I was on the tail end of MySpace.
I miss Tom. He was a good friend.
He was my first one.
He was just everybody's friend. He was. I remember seeing on Facebook there was a post that said, "Wouldn't it be cool if people could go to your Facebook profile and your favorite song would be playing whenever anybody looked at it?" And then somebody else commented, "We have now hit a generation that does not remember MySpace."
Right.
Oh man.
And
that's why I use MySpace.
The whole reason I love Facebook was that they didn't do that.
Oh,
I didn't have to listen to somebody else's music.
Oh, you know what? I'm good.
That's
I'm glad
I used MySpace.
I'm glad we're at least laughing a little bit, because this next article, I have no smooth segues for any of whoever put these in the order that they were in. I think they were just trying to have fun with me, because this article I can't help but think of as just funny. The article says a woman sued Trump.
Comment.
Yeah, a woman sued Trump for deceiving Christians and dooming them to hell. And I don't mean to read this in that incredulous tone, but I can't help it. A judge has tossed out a lawsuit against Donald Trump brought by a Delaware woman who claimed that Trump committed a crime by lying to her. The plaintiff is Megyn Kelly, not the former Fox News anchor, and she said that Trump deceived Christians into thinking he was one of them. She says that he's not a Christian because his actions are decidedly unchristian. Then this is where it gets fun, because this isn't even the fun part yet. It says, because Trump lied about being a Christian, other believers followed him, which meant they were sinning. And because they were sinning, they're now doomed to go to hell. And because they're going to hell, that means she will not be able to love them for eternity.
Well, that's
Again, I
unfortunate.
wish I could be making this up. I'm reading it word for word.
Right. This feels like something that I'd see on like The Onion or something, but we've been
Yeah.
living in The Onion for
I
several
was
years
just
now, I'm
thinking that.
convinced. So,
Let's just tee off on this article because I think we're gonna have fun. My big thing is, how do you calculate the damages for that? How do you figure out how much monetary
souls.
damages are
No,
your
not in
soul is in hell
dollars.
for eternity? What's
Not in
the
It's in
dollar
souls.
value?
They count souls. Yeah, it's how many souls have been corrupted.
Right.
I don't, and I love your note on this, Neil, which is exactly what you're doing right now.
Oh, dude, I pulled a muscle in my neck. I was laughing so hard.
And
The article is quite brilliant. It's from the Friendly
Oh.
Atheist. I can't remember if you said that or not yet, Puck.
no, I
it's well
completely
written.
forgot to, but yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, Hannah
And-
Meta is fantastic.
I really want to think that this was known to be frivolous from the beginning, but I also can't help but feel that maybe somebody actually genuinely felt this way. Like they
I'm
felt that
sure.
they had an actionable case to bring to court.
The only note that I wrote down here, sorry to interject,
No,
was
please.
that it's very apropos of the reality that Trump has wrought for himself,
Hmm.
meaning that he is king of either frivolous lawsuits or of breaking contracts that result in other people suing him. Which I would also maintain is a frivolous use of the justice system, making somebody go to court to enforce a contract against you instead of just obeying the contract as it's signed. I don't have a legal background. I just took a couple law classes, and I'm fascinated by contract law and how Trump just completely, just throws it to the wind and does whatever he wants instead. So this is appropriate for him. I hope he gets all the frivolous lawsuits in the world.
Gosh, I don't know. It's hard for me to. It's hard for me to wrap this around my head for a moment because you have evangelical groups that still stand by him even now, despite the various stuff that came out pre-2016 election cycle about him grabbing the vajayjay and all this other, just things that seem so immoral. But they take on the statement and they take on the belief that despite his immorality, their belief is that he is in favor of those moral policies that they want. And that's all they care about. And I'm like, that's just unfortunate for you that you have to rely on this individual. That's the person that you rely on to further your agenda. I'm like, by all means, try to, do what you want as far as policy or whatever. I mean, I'm not advocating for, Christian right groups to, put forth their hateful policies regardless anyway. But for that to be your representation of a person to try and push that forward, and you obviously recognizing how immoral in your mind he is, come on.
Absolutely. One thing that I have seen in the last few years is a lot of comparisons of Trump, and this is by evangelicals, of course, a lot of comparisons of Trump to Samson from the Bible. I'm not super familiar with the story. I just know that Samson was promised to deliver the deliverance of Israel, essentially. He was involved in that whole, the setup of Israel the first time around in the biblical times. And Samson was a flawed man. And the argument is that Trump is a flawed man too. And so the fact that they're now coming down and they're upset about how flawed he is, it's like, we know. It's been, like Jena said, the evidence has been there for years. I'd argue that I knew he was a bad person as far back as the birther thing with President Obama's birth certificate. That was Wally started by Donald Trump and then perpetuated by several right-wing outlets. But he was the one who brought that to the national stage. And so again, he's always been invested in frivolously questioning others' credibility. And so I think that that's what should happen to him until his last day. It's a fitting punishment, Sue the crap out of him.
I am glad though that this lawsuit was thrown out.
Right. Yes.
Are you surprised?
It would be bad case law. It would be bad precedent. I'm with you on that.
No, and I think, I mean, when a lawsuit is presented, obviously you have to, at least if you're the judge, you have to look at it and actually take it seriously, at least for the moment. And if you are going to throw something out, you must at least have a judicial reason for doing so. And I will leave it to our viewers to, because I don't, it's um, a really long takedown of it, but go ahead, please read it. And I like the summary that is here. In other words, it says Trump may be a moral monster, but you can't prove that MAGA cult members will spend the afterlife in a pit of fire. And I like that they actually put that in the judgment, that we can't quantify damages in an afterlife if we can't quantify the afterlife. And thank you for at least having one
Very
legal
logical
case that puts this into actual precedent. We can't, you can't sue for what might happen in hell.
Right.
Thank you very much for throwing that in. We have more time than usual at the end here, but I think that's good, because we had such a wide range of articles today that I would like to go from the side. Martin, start with you. What is your big takeaway, and what is your big call to action? What would you like our viewers to leave here doing differently?
Oh man,
maybe it's
on the spot.
Yeah,
It's a big question.
Yeah. So as far as a call to action, get to know your neighborhood, both like literally the people living next to you and also just your community in general. Get to know your local political candidates, get to know your city council members, get to know your town supervisor if you live in a smaller township. And then what was the other question? What did I enjoy about today?
What did you get out of today's articles and today's show?
So I think one of the biggest things that I just want to drive home is the difference between somebody who voted for Trump and somebody who's wearing a MAGA hat. Those are two different groups, and we need to approach both of them differently, but we definitely need to approach both of them if we want to change minds.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, what about you?
Well, I don't know if it's more like some words of wisdom, maybe. Like, next time you're out in public, take a look at the person next to you. They might not speak the same language as you. They might not be the same skin color as you, but if you can't look at that person and see them as an equal person that's deserving of the same respect that you get from time to time, then maybe the problem isn't who you're looking at. Maybe the problem is who's doing the looking. So remember to be kind to people, right? And a good laugh was had by one of those articles, the one we had at the end there. So, and laughter is healthy, so it's good for the brain. So,
indeed,
yeah, a good takeaway, I guess, from all that, and I guess the whole looking at the people around you and thinking about that stuff is because of the whole white supremacist. That stuff just angers me. So that's all I can say.
Yeah.
Jena, what do you got?
And be well and be safe and be well, people, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Be safe, folks.
Yeah. I would say my biggest, especially during the reading of the articles leading up to the show, just reflecting on my what I do as a career, just with everything that just breathing from the last couple of weeks, breathing almost to the end of this year, but we still have more to go moving on to the next, because we just don't know where exactly this whole pandemic, where this whole aftermath of the election, all of it is encompassing as one thing. Because the more we hear about the rhetoric, the more we hear about the vitriol, the more pushback we get from the other side wanting to not comply and not only protect themselves, but to protect others around you. So as a healthcare worker, I strongly advocate and just strongly advise to just look out for each other, and just look out for not just the people within your group, people with outside your group, people that are different, from different cultures, different backgrounds, orientations, skin color, all of that. Look out for all of us around you, because it's just important to just keep us safe. And so we can go back to rebuilding a better culture and a better community within us. And then also from that, if we're going to have discussions and if we're going to try and have this come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, to where we can sit down and have a discussion, let's sit down and have that discussion and make it civil, make it respectful. I advocate this wholeheartedly as a moderator on the ACD server. And, it starts with myself. I say this mostly in regards to myself. I want to be the best reflection and demonstrate the best possible, respectful, and civil person I can be. And hopefully that is mirrored from everyone else. So that is my biggest takeaway from all this.
My biggest takeaway is that I still have really big blind spots. These articles that we talk about on nonprofits are given to us several days in advance. And I will have to admit that had they not been brought to my attention, these are probably articles that I would have passed right by. And I probably would have looked at the headline and passed right by and not put as much thought into it as I would have if I had to engage with an audience and engage with a panel about the content of this. This made me do a lot more thinking and a lot more introspection and a lot more realizing that as much as I think I know and as much as I feel like I have to give, I have much more that I can learn. And I am thankful that I get to work with an organization and with the wonderful people that are sitting next to me on the panel, even though the nearest one is about 1,400 miles away, that they are patient enough with me that even if I have a misunderstanding, I can go to them and talk with them and we can have that conversation. And thank you to everybody who goes out and reaches out to people and has these conversations. And I am doing my best to be someone who can have those conversations also. My big call to action then with you is, even if you don't feel like you are the most knowledgeable person about a subject, go out there and talk to people and listen and find out different perspectives and listen to what people are going through and have that sense of empathy and that sense of, I don't have all the answers and I need to go out there and find out more. So thank you everybody on the panel for helping out. Thank you for being on this great show. I had a blast. For the rest of the audience listening, if you would like to support the nonprofits, you can sign up for our Patreon. That is patreon.com/thenonprofits. You can also email us with any comments or questions or articles you'd like us to go over. The email address is nonprofits@atheist-community.org. I would be doing a disservice if I did not once again remind, and I'm just going to hand this over to you, Jena, to talk about our Discord and how to find it.
Yes, so you can find our Discord. It is called the Atheist Community of Discord. I'm sure one of my moderators in the YouTube channel will plug that tiny URL link in the description down below. So be sure to check us out. It is a wealthy, wholesome community and a lot of different backgrounds and experiences from all sorts of people. I'm there often. I love to see you there too.
And we actually also now have a Facebook group. So if you look on Facebook and look for the fan group for the nonprofits, we'll start posting the articles on there so that you can read the articles for yourself and engage with them. I personally like to be on the Discord live chats for the premieres every Sunday. So look for us there. Please continue these conversations with us. We're out here listening and we want to talk to you. So until our next episode next week, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.